The Batwing screamed through a tunnel of impossible light, alarms shrieking as dimensional barriers tore at the hull like claws. Bruce Wayne gripped the controls, jaw clenched as reality folded in on itself. He'd been pursuing a metahuman trafficking ring through a boom tube when something went catastrophically wrong. The portal collapsed, twisted, and spat him into a corridor of energy that belonged to no universe he recognized. Then the light exploded into twin suns. The Batwing plummeted through an atmosphere it wasn't designed for, heat shields glowing cherry red as unfamiliar constellations wheeled overhead. Bruce fought for control, but the dimensional transit had fried half his systems. The craft tumbled end over end toward an endless expanse of golden sand, crashing into a dune with enough force to bury the nose 20 feet deep. Silence. Then the hiss of hydraulics as the cockpit opened. Bruce dragged himself from the wreckage, cowl sensors scanning an environment that made Death Valley look hospitable. 2 suns blazed overhead, casting harsh double shadows across dunes that stretched to every horizon. The air tasted of copper and ozone. His suit's environmental systems kicked in immediately, compensating for heat that would kill an unprotected human in hours. He stood in the shadow of his ruined craft, the black angular hull already half buried in sand. No GPS signal. No satellite uplink. Not even radio chatter. The silence was absolute except for the whisper of wind across infinite desert. Bruce accessed the Batwing's computer core, partially intact, and began analyzing the readings it had captured during the transit. The data made no sense. Stellar positions completely wrong. Atmospheric composition slightly off. And something else, something his instruments kept flagging as an unknown energy signature permeating everything, like background radiation but more alive. A sound reached him. Engines. Anti-grav repulsors. Bruce melted into the shadow of a dune as a battered transport screamed overhead, scarred hull trailing black smoke. Seconds later, 2 sleeker craft followed, angular, aggressive designs that fired bolts of superheated energy. Not lasers. Something else. The wounded ship shuddered under the barrage and crashed 2 clicks away, throwing up a plume of sand. The attack craft circled once, then peeled off toward a cluster of structures shimmering on the horizon. Bruce studied those distant buildings through his cowl's enhanced optics. A settlement. Civilization. Answers. He pulled a grapnel gun from his belt, confirmed it still functioned, and began the long walk across the sand. Behind him, the Batwing systems initiated an automatic burial protocol, sinking the craft deeper to avoid detection while its repair subroutines began cataloging the catastrophic damage. The Force binds all things across the galaxy, connecting every living being in an invisible web of energy that flows through starships and sand grains alike, through Jedi and smugglers, through the righteous and the damned. But what happens when something from beyond that web arrives? Something trained in different shadows, driven by different demons, bound by a code forged in an alley that doesn't exist anywhere in this galaxy far, far away. 4 hours of walking brought Bruce to the outskirts of what his cowl's pattern recognition software identified as a spaceport, though unlike any he'd seen in his own universe. The architecture was a chaotic blend of domed structures, jutting landing platforms, and buildings that looked like they'd been assembled from starship scrap. Massive reptilian creatures lumbered through streets alongside hovering droids and beings of a dozen different species. Not metahumans. Aliens. Actual extraterrestrial life. Bruce crouched on a rooftop, watching the flow of foot traffic below. He'd encountered alien species before, Martian Manhunter, the Green Lantern Corps, but this was different. This was a society, a civilization where humanity was just one species among many. He spotted what looked like humans, or near humans, but they were outnumbered by beings with tentacles, scaled skin, multiple arms, and anatomies that defied Earth biology. His cowl's audio pickups isolated conversations, but the languages were completely unfamiliar. The computer began building translation matrices, cross-referencing syntax and grammar at machine speed, but it would take time to decode these alien tongues. A commotion drew his attention to the street below. 3 thugs, bipedal, tusked, heavily muscled, were shaking down a merchant at a spice stand. The merchant, a thin humanoid with blue skin, tried to resist. One of the thugs drew a weapon, compact, pistol-shaped, but with an energy cell where the magazine should be. The merchant raised his hands in surrender. Bruce dropped from the rooftop without thinking. He landed behind the thugs, cape spreading like wings. The nearest one spun, raising his weapon. Bruce struck with precision, a nerve strike to the wrist that made the alien's fingers spasm open, a sweep that took his legs out, an elbow that ensured he stayed down. The second thug fired his weapon. Bruce's cape snapped out, the blast of superheated energy, a blaster bolt, his mind catalogued, dispersing against the armored weave. He closed the distance in 2 steps, disarmed the shooter with a joint lock, and put him down with a measured strike to the temple. The third thug ran. Bruce let him go. He turned to the merchant, who stared at him with wide, terrified eyes, eyes that were entirely black, without visible pupils. "Are you hurt?" Bruce asked. The merchant made a series of sounds that might have been words. Bruce's cowl translated nothing, insufficient data. He tried again in what languages he knew, English, Mandarin, Arabic, Russian. Nothing registered. The merchant backed away, then fled into the crowd. Bruce retrieved one of the fallen blasters, examining its mechanism. Particle acceleration, plasma generation, contained by magnetic fields. Elegant. Efficient. And everywhere, nearly every being on the street carried one openly. This was an armed society, where violence was casual and life was cheap. Welcome to the Outer Rim. He needed information. Resources. A way to understand where he was and how to get home. But first, he needed to stay alive. Bruce faded back into the shadows between buildings, just another darkness in a settlement full of them, and began the work he knew best, learning the city's secrets. Above, twin suns blazed. Below, in the Cantina district of Mos Eisley, rumors were already spreading of a shadow that moved like smoke and struck like a sandstorm. By morning, the name would reach the Hutt's palace. Something new had arrived in the Dune Sea, something that fought without killing and disappeared without trace. In a galaxy ruled by the Empire's iron fist and the underworld's ruthless code, Batman had just announced his presence. And the Outer Rim was about to learn what it meant when justice wore a cape. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. May the Force be with you. Mos Eisley revealed itself in layers, like peeling back scar tissue to expose the infected wound beneath. Bruce spent 3 days mapping the spaceport from rooftop shadows and ventilation tunnels, his cowls computer-absorbing patterns of movement, trade routes, power structures. The translation matrices were improving. He could now parse basic galactic basic, the lingua franca of this strange galaxy, though dozens of other languages remained impenetrable. What he learned painted a grim picture. This wasn't Earth. This wasn't even his universe. The technology, the species, the fundamental physics, everything screamed elsewhere. His cowl's analysis of the ambient energy signature concluded it was some form of quantum field that permeated all matter, something the locals referred to in hushed tones as the Force. Bruce filed that away for later investigation. Right now, survival took precedence over physics. The power structure was brutally simple. The Hutt cartel controlled Tatooine's criminal enterprises, the Empire maintained minimal presence through scattered garrisons, and everyone else scrambled for scraps in between. The Bounty Hunters Guild operated openly here, taking contracts from both legitimate and criminal sources. It was a system that would make Gotham's mob families look like amateur hour. Bruce watched from the shadows as a Trandoshan hunter dragged a struggling Twi'lek through the street, a tracking fob beeping in his clawed hand. The captive's pleas went ignored by passers-by. When they disappeared into a cantina, Bruce followed. The establishment was called Cowman's, a low-ceilinged den thick with smoke and the stench of a dozen different species intoxicants. A band of furry musicians played discordant music in one corner. Patrons hunched over tables, conducting business in low voices while droids served drinks. Bruce's entrance drew a few glances, but the locals were accustomed to strange sights. Cape and cowl marked him as either a hunter in unusual armor or a fool who'd die before sunset. The Trandoshan had his captive at a corner table, negotiating with a gran, 3 eyes on stalks, goat-like snout. Money changed hands. A collar was fastened around the Twi'lek's neck. The transaction had all the hallmarks of a slave deal. Bruce's jaw tightened. He'd seen human trafficking in Gotham, broken-up rings that traded in misery and desperation. This was the same cancer, just wearing an alien face. He approached the table. Let her go. The cantina's ambient noise died by degrees as patrons sensed confrontation. The Trandoshan looked up, yellow eyes narrowing. When he spoke, Bruce's cowl translated the hissing dosh into comprehensible words. This doesn't concern you, mammal. The Twi'lek is wanted. I'm collecting a bounty. Wanted for what? Theft from Jabba's palace. The hunter's claws rested on the blaster at his hip. She's worth 5,000 credits alive. Less if damaged, but still profitable. Walk away. Bruce accessed his cowl's analysis of the Twi'lek's biometrics, elevated heart rate, signs of physical abuse, genuine terror in her expression. Guilty or not, she didn't deserve whatever fate awaited her in a Hutt's dungeon. I said let her go. The Trandoshan stood, towering over Bruce by a foot. You're new here. So I'll educate you, the guild has rules. You don't interfere with another hunter's bounty. You don't. Bruce moved. His gauntlet fist caught the Trandoshan in the solar plexus, or what passed for one in his reptilian anatomy, doubling him over. A knee to the face sent him sprawling. The Gran reached for his weapon. Bruce's batarang took him in the wrist, the razor edge slicing through scales and tendons. The Gran screamed, his blaster clattering to the floor. 3 more hunters rose from their tables, weapons drawn. Bruce's cape swept around him as blaster bolts scorched the air. He was already moving, using the cantina's pillars for cover, throwing smoke pellets that billowed through the confined space. The hunters fired blind, hitting walls and each other. Bruce emerged from the smoke behind a Rodian, disarming him with a wrist lock and using him as a shield against a weakway's shot. The Rodian went limp. Bruce felt for a pulse, alive, unconscious. He dropped the body and pressed his advantage, moving through the chaos like a wraith. A human hunter with cybernetic implants tried to track him with enhanced optics. Bruce's EMP batarang fried the systems, leaving the man clawing at his sparking eye sockets. A Nikto with a vibroblade charged. Bruce redirected the momentum, sending him crashing through a table. 30 seconds. 7 hunters down. None dead. The Trandoshan struggled to his feet, drawing a backup blaster. Bruce's line launcher fired, the monofilament cable wrapping around the hunter's arm and yanking the weapon away. He closed the distance, struck pressure points that worked across species, and put the Trandoshan down with clinical efficiency. Silence descended. The remaining patrons stared. The bartender, a Wookiee with gray-streaked fur, growled something that Bruce's cowl translated as, "You just made a very expensive mistake." Bruce ignored him. He knelt beside the Twi'lek, examining the collar around her neck. Electronic lock, basic design. He pulled a specialized tool from his belt, interfacing with the mechanism. 3 seconds and it clicked open. The Twi'lek stared at him with wide, disbelieving eyes. "Can you run?" he asked. She nodded, mute with shock. "Then run. Don't stop until you're off this planet." She fled without a backward glance. Bruce turned to face the cantina's assembled criminals and lowlifes. Every weapon was trained on him. The Wookiee bartender spoke again, "The guild doesn't forgive interference. You've just signed your death warrant. Then they're welcome to try collecting." Bruce's voice was gravelly, modulated by his cowl to sound even more inhuman. He dropped a smoke pellet and vanished through a back exit before anyone could fire. He emerged into an alley, immediately scaling the nearest wall to the rooftops. Below, hunters poured from the cantina, shouting orders, scanning for his trail. Bruce was already 3 buildings away, cape blending with the shadows of overhanging structures. His cowl's comm system had been monitoring local frequencies, and now it lit up with chatter. Unknown vigilante attacked guild members. Described as humanoid, black armor, cape. Fights like a demon. The Trandoshan boss wants his head. 5,000 credit bounty for information. Bruce smiled grimly. He'd come to Mos Eisley looking for information and resources. Instead, he'd just painted a target on his back. But he'd also learned something crucial. This galaxy operated on a code where might made right, where the strong preyed on the weak, and where justice was a commodity bought and sold. That would have to change. At least in his corner of it. He moved across the rooftops toward the Cantina district's edge, where his cowl had identified a workshop that dealt in technology similar to his own gear. If he was going to survive here, he'd need to adapt his equipment, refine his tactics, and understand the rules before he could break them properly. Behind him, the guild's hunters fanned out through Mos Eisley's streets, searching for the shadow that had humiliated their members and violated their sacred code. They expected a fight. They expected violence. They had no concept of what was actually hunting them back, studying their patterns, learning their weaknesses, preparing to dismantle their operations one calculated strike at a time. Batman had arrived in the Outer Rim. And the galaxy's hunters were about to discover they'd become the prey. The workshop belonged to a Ugnaught named Keel, a grizzled engineer who'd spent 40 years servicing everything from speeder bikes to starship hyperdrives. Bruce found him through careful observation, watching who the locals trusted with delicate repairs, who asked fewer questions, who worked alone. Keel's shop occupied a converted hangar on Mos Eisley's outskirts, far enough from the Cantina district to avoid casual scrutiny. Bruce approached after midnight, when the twin moons cast long shadows across the sand. Keel was still working, stubby fingers manipulating a malfunctioning motivator unit with surprising precision. He didn't look up when Bruce entered through the shadows. "I have heard of you," Keel said in accented basic, his mechanical modulator translating his native language. "The one who shames hunters without killing. Foolish. Mercy is weakness here." "Mercy is a choice," Bruce replied, stepping into the light. "Weakness is letting fear dictate your actions." Keel finally looked up, regarding Batman with ancient, knowing eyes. "You are not from this world. Your armor, I have seen many designs, but nothing like this. What do you want?" Bruce placed several items on the workbench, a damaged grapnel gun, an EMP batarang with a depleted charge cell, a sample of his cape's armored weave. "I need to adapt my equipment to local technology. I can pay." He produced a small diamond from his utility belt, earth-cut, flawless, worth a fortune in any universe. Keel examined the gem with a jeweler's loupe, then grunted. "This will suffice. But know this, the guild has placed a bounty on you. 5,000 credits. Many will come. Let them." The Ugnaught's mouth twisted into what might have been a smile. "I have spoken. We will begin." Over the next week, Bruce transformed Keel's workshop into a makeshift Batcave. He studied the local technology with the same obsessive focus he'd once applied to Wayne Enterprises' R&D. Blasters used Tabana gas for plasma generation, he could replicate the charge cells for his equipment. Durasteel was the standard structural material, harder than titanium, perfect for replacing depleted batarangs. Cortosis or could short out energy weapons, he needed some woven into his cowl's armor plating. Keel proved invaluable, his decades of experience filling gaps in Bruce's understanding. "Your grappling device uses chemical propellant," the engineer noted, examining the line launcher. "Inefficient. We will convert to compressed gas with magnetic acceleration. Triple the range, silent operation. Can you source the parts without attracting attention?" "I have spoken. It will be done." While Keel worked, Bruce ventured into Mos Eisley each night, continuing his campaign against the Guild's operations. He sabotaged a slave shipment bound for the Hutt's palace, freeing 20 captives and leaving the Gamorrean guards unconscious in the sand. He intercepted a team of hunters pursuing a young human who'd stolen food to survive, non-lethal takedowns, all of them, with the hunters waking hours later to find their weapons dismantled and a calling card, a small bat-shaped piece of durasteel. The Outer Rim's criminal element began to whisper a new name, the Bat. Some claimed he was a Jedi survivor hiding his abilities. Others insisted he was a new type of bounty hunter with a twisted code. A few suggested something darker, a demon from the Emperor's Inquisitorius, testing the Guild's strength. Bruce encouraged the rumors. Fear was a tool, and in a galaxy this vast, reputation could accomplish what fists alone could not. On the 8th night, the Guild made their move. Bruce was returning to Keel's workshop when his cowl's sensors detected an ambush, 12 hunters in concealed positions, thermal signatures surrounding the hangar. They'd tracked him through patience and pattern analysis, professional work. He'd have done the same. He triggered his comm. Keel, company's coming. Secure the workshop and stay down. I have spoken. The channel went dead. Bruce approached the kill zone deliberately, letting them think he was unaware. A Rodian named Greedo, young, arrogant, eager to make his reputation, stepped from behind a moisture vaporator, blaster raised. End of the line, Bat. The Guild sends its regards. The Guild should have sent better hunters. Greedo fired. Bruce's cape snapped out, the bolt dissipating against its armored weave, now reinforced with energy-resistant materials courtesy of Keel's expertise. He threw a batarang that curved mid-flight, guided by micro-thrusters, striking Greedo's weapon from his hand. The Rodian barely had time to register surprise before Bruce was on him, pressure point strike to the nerve cluster at his neck. Greedo crumpled. Blaster fire erupted from all sides. Bruce moved through it like smoke, using the modified grapnel to reach high ground on the hangar's roof. 2 hunters followed, jetpacks screaming, Mandalorian armor, he noted, authentic or salvaged. He dropped flashbangs that overloaded their helmet optics, then swept their legs out from under them when they landed blind. They went down hard, armor clanging against durasteel. A Trandoshan, not Bosk, but one of his clan brothers, charged with a vibro-axe. Bruce sidestepped the swing, trapped the weapon arm, and delivered a calculated elbow strike that shattered the reptilian's jaw. The Trandoshan roared in pain and rage, but Bruce was already gone, disappearing into the shadows between structures. The remaining hunters spread out, professional despite their losses. Bruce picked them off one by one, a human with a jetpack, grounded with a line launcher cable around his ankles, a weak-way sharpshooter, his rifle's scope shattered by a precisely thrown batarang, a Nikto with a flamethrower, the fuel tank punctured and depressurized before he could ignite it. The last 3 hunters regrouped near Keel's entrance. Bruce dropped among them from above, cape spreading like wings of judgment. Fists, elbows, nerve strikes, the rhythm of combat he'd perfected over decades in Gotham's alleys. They fought well, these Guild hunters, trained and experienced. But they fought to kill, and that required different tactics than fighting to disable. Bruce exploited every opening, every moment of lethal commitment, turning their aggression against them. Silence returned to the desert night. 12 hunters lay unconscious, their weapons scattered, their pride shattered. Bruce checked each one for vitals, all alive, some with broken bones but nothing permanent. He left them there for their colleagues to find, along with a message scratched into the sand in Orbesh characters his cowl had learned to write, the Guild's code ends where innocent lives begin. Keel emerged from the workshop, surveying the carnage with his usual stoic expression. You have made powerful enemies. The Guild will not stop. Then I'll keep stopping them. Bruce retrieved his scattered batarangs, each one a precious resource he couldn't afford to lose. How long until my equipment upgrades are complete? 3 days. Perhaps 4. Keel paused. There is talk. The guild has approached someone to deal with you. Someone dangerous. Who? They call him Boba Fett. The best hunter in the galaxy. Keel's ancient eyes held a warning. He does not fail. He does not show mercy. And he is coming here. Bruce absorbed this information without visible reaction. In every city, in every underworld, there was always someone at the top of the food chain, the enforcer, the legend, the one even other predators feared. He'd faced Ra's al Ghul, Deathstroke, Lady Shiva. One more apex predator wouldn't change his mission. Then I'll be ready, he said simply. Keel nodded slowly. I have spoken. We continue the work. They returned to the workshop, leaving the unconscious hunters for the desert scavengers, both animal and human, to find. Above, the stars wheeled in unfamiliar constellations, cold and distant. Somewhere among them, a bounty hunter in Mandalorian armor was calculating vectors, studying reports, preparing to hunt the galaxy's newest legend. The Bat's war against the Outer Rim's cruelty had just escalated. And in 3 days, when his equipment was ready and his understanding of this galaxy complete, Batman would take the fight beyond Mos Eisley's walls to the real source of Tatooine's misery, Jabba's palace, where slaves suffered and crime lords ruled with impunity. But first, he would deal with Boba Fett. Professional to professional. Hunter to hunter. And one of them would learn that reputation alone doesn't win fights, preparation does. The bounty posting appeared on every guild frequency simultaneously. Target, the Bat. Wanted alive for questioning by guild authority. Bounty, 20,000 credits. Contractor, Boba Fett, independent verification. Bruce intercepted the transmission in Keel's workshop, his Cowl's computer analyzing the encryption protocols. 20,000 was significant, enough to attract every hunter within 3 parsecs. But the alive specification was interesting. Fett wanted to talk before deciding whether to kill him. Professional curiosity, perhaps. Or tactical assessment. This Boba Fett, Bruce said, watching Keel calibrate the new grapnel launcher. Tell me about him. The Ugnaughts' hands didn't pause in their work. Clone template Jango Fett's unaltered son. Raised as a warrior from childhood. Survived the Clone Wars, the Jedi Purge, the Empire's rise. His reputation is earned through decades of completed contracts. He has captured Jedi, crime lords, Imperial traitors. He does not fail. Everyone has weaknesses. Perhaps. Keel attached the final component, a miniaturized repulsor coil that would triple the grapnel's lifting capacity. But Fett's armor is genuine Mandalorian Beskar. Blaster-proof. Lightsaber-resistant. And his weapons. I have spoken. You should leave Tatooine while you can. Not until I'm finished here. Bruce spent the next 48 hours preparing for 2 simultaneous operations, defending against Fett's arrival and launching his assault on Jabba's palace. The work was methodical, consuming, exactly the kind of tactical planning that had kept him alive in Gotham for years. Keel delivered the final equipment upgrades, grapnel launcher with magnetic acceleration and 300-meter range, batarangs with cortosis edges that could short-circuit energy weapons, cowl sensors upgraded to detect the full electromagnetic spectrum used by local tracking technology, utility belt restocked with local smoke pellets, flashbangs, and EMP charges, cape reinforced with additional energy dispersion weave. Your armor, Keel said, gesturing to the bat suit. It will not stop a direct blaster hit at close range. The material is impressive, but not designed for particle weapons. I don't plan on getting hit. Fett will not miss. Bruce tested the modified grapnel, firing it at the workshop's ceiling. The line sang out with barely a whisper, the magnetic clamp adhering instantly. He retracted, pulling himself up with smooth acceleration. Perfect. Then I'll make sure he doesn't get a clean shot. On the 3rd day, Boba Fett arrived. Bruce was on a rooftop overlooking Docking Bay 94 when the ship descended, a fire spray, 31 assault craft, scarred and deadly, its weapons systems tracking potential threats even as it landed. The ship's name was emblazoned on its hull, Slave Eye. The boarding ramp lowered. Boba Fett emerged. The armor was instantly recognizable from Bruce's research, Mandalorian design, painted in greens and reds, battered by years of combat but maintained with obsessive care. A T-shaped visor regarded the spaceport with calculated menace. Weapons bristled from every mounting point, EE-3 carbine rifle, wrist-mounted flamethrower, fibercord whip, rocket launcher on the back plate. This was a walking armory wrapped in Beskar steel. Fett moved through Mos Eisley like he owned it, which in a sense he did. Other hunters nodded respectfully or simply got out of his way. He entered Kalman's cantina, the same establishment Bruce had disrupted weeks ago, and emerged 20 minutes later with a datapad containing every known detail about the bat's activities. Bruce watched from the shadows, analyzing movement patterns, weapon placements, potential vulnerabilities. The armor was comprehensive, but joints required flexibility. The helmet sensor array was sophisticated, but it could be overwhelmed. The jetpack provided mobility, but it was a single point of failure. Most importantly, Fett was human. Enhanced by training and equipment, but still operating within biological limits. He would need to sleep, to eat, to lower his guard eventually. Bruce could wait. Patience was its own weapon. But Fett didn't give him the chance. "I know you're watching," Fett's voice crackled across the local comm frequencies, modulated by his helmet but unmistakably addressing Bruce. "The rooftop, northwest of the cantina, third building. You're good at hiding, but thermal imaging doesn't lie." Bruce was moving before the sentence finished, explosive charges detonating across 3 adjacent rooftops to create a smokescreen. Blaster fire cut through the haze, not random spraying, but calculated shots that anticipated his escape vectors. Fett had studied him, analyzed his patterns, predicted his tactics. This was going to be more difficult than anticipated. Bruce grappled to ground level, landing in an alley. Fett's jetpack screamed overhead, the hunter tracking him from above. A rocket streaked down, not aimed to kill, but to herd. Bruce rolled through the explosion's periphery, smoke and shrapnel peppering his cape. He threw a batarang at the jetpack's exhaust ports, but Fett twisted mid-flight, letting the projectile sail past. "Impressive reflexes," Fett said, landing 30 meters away with his carbine raised. "But you're in my world now. The guild wants answers. Come quietly, and this doesn't have to get messy." "I don't do quietly." Bruce threw a smoke pellet and charged through the cloud, closing the distance before Fett could fire. The hunter's combat training was immediately evident. He shifted into a Mandalorian fighting stance, using the carbine as a close-quarters staff. They exchanged blows, Bruce's martial arts against Fett's armor-enhanced strikes. The Beskar made every hit like punching Dura steel, but Bruce targeted joints, gaps, the spaces between plates. Fett's wrist flamethrower ignited. Bruce's cape wrapped around his arm, smothering the flame. He followed with a sweep, but Fett's jetpack fired a burst, launching him backward out of range. The hunter's fibercord whip lashed out, wrapping around Bruce's ankle. An electrical charge surged through the line. Bruce's suit's insulation absorbed most of it, but the shock was enough to stagger him. Fett yanked the cord, pulling Bruce off balance. The carbine came up. Bruce severed the fiber cord with a batarang mid-pull, regaining his footing and throwing 3 more in rapid succession. Fett's armor absorbed 2, but the third found a gap between helmet and chest plate, drawing a thin line of blood. First wound. Fett touched his neck, examining the blood on his glove. "You're better than the report suggested. You're exactly what I expected." They circled each other in the alley, 2 apex predators measuring capabilities. Bruce's cowl analyzed Fett's breathing, heart rate, micro-movements. The hunter was evaluating him the same way, calculating odds, adjusting tactics. "The guild wants to know who you are," Fett said. "Why you're disrupting operations. What your agenda is. My agenda is simple, the innocent don't get preyed on while I'm here. Noble. Naive. Fett's helmet tilted slightly. The outer rim doesn't reward nobility. It eats idealists alive. I've heard that before. Usually from people I put away. Then you know how this ends. You can't save everyone. You can't change the system. The best you can do is survive. Fett's carbine lowered slightly, not holstering it, but reducing immediate threat. Walk away from Tatooine. Take your code somewhere it might actually matter. I'll tell the guild you were killed. Everyone wins. Bruce considered the offer for exactly 3 seconds. It was pragmatic, even generous by bounty hunter standards. Fett was giving him an out, a clean escape from a fight that benefited neither of them. But walking away meant abandoning the slaves in Jabba's palace. The refugees hiding in Mos Eisley's slums. The desperate people who'd started leaving messages in the places Bruce patrolled, hoping the bat would help them. No deal, Bruce said. Fett's sigh was audible even through the helmet. Then we do this the hard way. The jetpack flared. Fett launched into the air, carbine firing in controlled bursts. Bruce grappled to the rooftops, using Mos Eisley's chaotic architecture for cover. The chase became three-dimensional, Fett with aerial superiority, Bruce with intimate knowledge of ground-level terrain. They traded shots across rooftop chasms, through narrow alleyways, over market squares where civilians scattered in panic. Bruce led Fett away from populated areas, toward the outskirts where the buildings gave way to desert. The hunter followed, recognizing the tactical shift but confident in his superior firepower. They reached an abandoned moisture farm, its ancient equipment rusting under twin suns. Bruce dropped into the farm's maintenance tunnels. Fett landed outside, thermal imaging tracking the bat's movements underground. He primed a seismic charge. Bruce emerged behind him, having used the tunnel system to circle around. His EMP batarang struck Fett's jetpack control module. The hunter's HUD flickered, targeting systems disrupted. Bruce pressed the advantage, striking with precision, solar plexus, kidney, the gap behind the knee joint. Fett stumbled, then activated his helmet's sonic weapon, a high-frequency pulse that would liquefy organs at close range. Bruce's cowl's audio dampeners kicked in, reducing the pulse to tolerable levels. He tackled Fett, using the hunter's own weight and momentum to drive him into the sand. They grappled, each trying to gain dominant position. Fett's superior strength versus Bruce's superior technique. Then Fett's backup arrived, 3 guild hunters in speeders, weapons trained on Bruce. Enough, Fett said, pushing Bruce off and standing. Blood trickled from multiple gaps in his armor. You're skilled. I'll grant you that. But you're outnumbered and outgunned. Bruce assessed the situation. For armed opponents, open terrain, limited cover. Poor odds. Winnable, but not without collateral damage he wasn't willing to accept. He triggered a massive smoke screen and disappeared into the desert. Fett didn't pursue. He simply stood there, watching the bat vanish, and said quietly into his helmet's comm, "Target is more dangerous than reported. Recommend tripling the bounty. And tell Jabba, the bat is coming for his palace. Prepare accordingly." Keel's workshop became a fortress over the next 72 hours. Bruce modified the hangar's approaches with motion sensors, pressure plates, and remote detonated charges, not to kill, but to channel attackers into predetermined kill zones where he held every advantage. The Ugnaught watched this transformation with his characteristic stoicism, occasionally offering suggestions on local technology integration. "You fought Boba Fett to a standstill," Keel observed, welding a reinforcement plate onto one of Bruce's gauntlets. "Few can claim this. But you did not win." "I wasn't trying to win. I was gathering data." Bruce studied holographic schematics of Jabba's palace, stolen from guild archives through careful network infiltration. The structure was a fortress, 3 levels above ground, 2 below, surrounded by desert with clear sight lines in every direction. Fett fights with overwhelming force and superior equipment. He's patient, tactical, willing to withdraw and reassess. That tells me he values efficiency over pride. This is wisdom. But it will not help you breach the palace. Keel highlighted sections of the schematic. Jabba's security is layered. Gamorrean guards at every entrance. Automated defense turrets. A rancor in the sublevel. And Jabba himself has bodyguards who have served him for decades. You will die there. Only if I go in the front door. Bruce had spent weeks observing the palace from distance, using his cowl's enhanced optics to map patrol patterns and identify vulnerabilities. The structure was ancient, built on even older Hutt architecture, and age meant weaknesses. Specifically, a thermal exhaust system that vented the palace's waste heat into the desert, large enough for human infiltration if one had the right equipment. Which Bruce now did. But Jabba's palace was the long-term objective. The immediate problem was the bounty on his head, now tripled to 60,000 credits, enough to attract hunters from across the Outer Rim. Keel's workshop had been discovered. 3 separate teams had already probed the defenses, each one repelled by Bruce's traps and tactics. It was only a matter of time before someone got lucky or Fett returned with overwhelming force. Bruce needed to shift the dynamic. Instead of reacting to hunters, he would hunt them first. The next target presented itself through careful monitoring of guild communications, a slave transport scheduled to depart Mos Eisley in 48 hours, destination unknown, carrying 30 captives taken in raids across the Outer Rim. The transport would be guarded by a dozen hunters, all seasoned professionals. The operations leader was a human named Janier, brutal, efficient, with a reputation for delivering merchandise undamaged. Bruce studied the transport's route. It would pass through the Jundland wastes, narrow canyons that limited visibility and created natural ambush points. The kind of terrain that favored preparation over firepower. Perfect. I need to borrow your speeder, Bruce told Keel. The Ugnaughts' expression didn't change. You plan to attack the transport alone. This is foolishness compounded by madness. No. This is sending a message. Bruce secured his utility belt, checking each compartment. Everything was in place: batarangs, smoke pellets, EMP charges, medical supplies, the new grapnel launcher. The guild thinks I'm a nuisance. A vigilante disrupting business. They need to understand I'm a threat to their entire operation on this planet. You are one being. They are hundreds. Then they should bring more. Keel studied him for a long moment, then tossed Bruce the speeder's activation key. I have spoken. Do not damage my vehicle. Bruce departed at dawn, the speeder's repulsors humming across the desert floor. The twin suns climbed toward zenith, heat shimmering off the sand. He reached the Jundland wastes by midday and began setting his trap. The canyon walls were porous sandstone, perfect for anchoring grapnel points and concealment positions. Bruce rigged shaped charges at strategic choke points, not to collapse the canyon, but to create obstacles and confusion. He scattered caltrops across the floor, modified with cortosis to pierce speeder repulsor housings. He positioned smoke canisters on the high ground, ready to obscure sight lines on command. Then he waited. Patience was its own weapon. Bruce had learned this in Gotham, waiting in the rain for criminals who might never show, understanding that every second of stillness made the eventual strike more effective. Here, under alien suns in a galaxy far from home, the principle remained the same. The transport appeared 2 hours before sunset, right on schedule. 3 speeder bikes as outriders, followed by the main transport, a heavily armored repulsor sled with energy shields and automated defense turrets. 9 more guards rode in formation around it, weapons ready, scanning for threats. Professional security. They'd learned from previous attacks that the Bat favored stealth and surprise. They were prepared for ambush. But not for this. Bruce triggered the first charges remotely. The canyon floor erupted in controlled explosions, throwing sand and rock into the air. The speeder bikes swerved, riders fighting for control. One hit the caltrops, his speeder's repulsors failed instantly, sending the vehicle crashing into the canyon wall at full speed. The rider tumbled, unconscious before he hit the ground. The transport's shields flared, absorbing the blast wave. Janier's voice crackled across their comms, defensive formation. It's the bat. Thermal scans, now. Bruce was already moving, grappling to the canyon walls above their position. The guard's thermal scanners swept the area, and found nothing. His suit's insulation systems masked his heat signature, making him invisible to their primary detection method. They were scanning for a target that didn't exist while the real threat positioned itself directly overhead. He dropped among them like a shadow given form. The first guard went down with a nerve strike that shut down his motor control for 30 seconds. The second barely had time to raise her blaster before a batarang knocked it from her hand and a follow-up strike put her unconscious. The third fired. Bruce's cape absorbed the shot, the energy dissipating across its weave while he closed the distance and disabled the shooter with clinical precision. Open fire. Janier screamed. All units, converge on. Bruce threw an EMP charge into the transport's shield generator. The device detonated in a pulse of electromagnetic energy, frying circuits and collapsing the protective field. The automated turret swiveled, tracking him, but he was already behind cover, throwing flashbangs that overloaded their optical sensors. The remaining guards coordinated their assault, firing in overlapping patterns designed to eliminate cover and force him into kill zones. They were good, better than the hunters he'd faced in Mos Eisley. But Bruce had fought the League of Assassins, had trained with warriors who'd perfected combat over centuries. These hunters were professionals. Bruce was something beyond that. He used the canyon's geometry against them, bouncing batarangs off walls to strike from impossible angles. He grappled between positions faster than they could track, appearing and disappearing like smoke. When they clustered together for mutual protection, he drove them apart with precision-thrown explosives. When they spread out, he picked them off individually in the brief moments when they lost line-of-sight contact. 7 minutes. 12 guards unconscious. None dead. Janier remained in the transport, protected by its armor plating. Bruce approached the vehicle, placing a shaped charge on the rear hatch. The explosion blew the door inward, and Bruce entered through the smoke. The transport's interior was cramped, lined with cages holding the captives, Twi'leks, humans, a few species Bruce didn't recognize. Their eyes tracked him with desperate hope mixed with terror. Janier stood at the control console, a blaster carbine trained on Bruce's center mass. "You're insane," the slaver said, finger tightening on the trigger. "You can't free them all. You can't change anything. This is what the Outer Rim is. Then I'll change the Outer Rim." Janier fired. Bruce was already moving, the bolt scorching past his shoulder. His batarang struck Janier's wrist with surgical precision, breaking bones and sending the carbine clattering to the floor. Bruce closed the remaining distance in 3 steps, disarming the slaver and putting him down with a controlled strike. The captive stared in stunned silence. Bruce accessed the cage controls, overriding the locks. The doors hissed open. "Can any of you pilot this transport?" A human woman, younger than she should be for what she'd endured, raised her hand. "I was a cargo pilot before they took me." "Then get everyone to Anchorhead. There's a settlement there that doesn't ask questions. Tell them the bat sent you." "Who are you?" she whispered. Bruce paused at the hatch, cape billowing in the desert wind. "Someone who believes the guilty should fear the dark." He disappeared into the Jundland wastes, leaving the freed captives, unconscious hunters, and a clear message for the Guild: their operations on Tatooine were no longer secure. The response was immediate. Guild frequencies erupted with fury and disbelief. A single operator had crippled a major slave transport. Janier, one of their most reliable specialists, defeated without killing a single guard. The bat had escalated from nuisance to existential threat. And the message that burned through every channel was simple: all available hunters report to Mos Eisley. Priority Alpha. The guild is going to war. Bruce returned to Keel's workshop as the second sun set, painting the desert in shades of blood and gold. The Ugnaught was waiting with the promised armor upgrades, a thin layer of durasteel plating integrated into the batsuit's chest and back, enough to deflect glancing blaster hits without adding significant weight. The guild calls for war, Keel said, helping Bruce secure the new plating. 30 hunters are already en route. More will come. You have provoked the storm. Good. Bruce tested the armor's flexibility, satisfied with its range of motion. I want them focused on me. Every hunter chasing my shadow is one less hunter out there preying on the desperate. And when they corner you? When Boba Fett returns with an army? Bruce's expression was hidden behind his cowl, but his voice carried absolute conviction. Then I'll show them why predators fear the dark. Keel nodded slowly. I have spoken. Your war begins in earnest. May you survive to finish it. That night, while the guild marshaled its forces and Jabba's palace prepared its defenses, Batman stood on the rooftops of Mos Eisley and watched a galaxy of unfamiliar stars will overhead. Somewhere out there was home, Earth, Gotham, a universe that made sense. But that was irrelevant now. Here, in this corner of a strange galaxy, the innocent were suffering. And Bruce Wayne had never been able to walk away from that, no matter how many light years separated him from home. The guild wanted war. Jabba wanted his head. The Empire would eventually take notice. Let them come. Batman was just getting started. The guild's army arrived in waves over the next 3 days. Bruce counted 47 hunters, their ships crowding Mos Eisley's docking bays and spilling into improvised landing zones. Trandashans, Rhodians, humans, Weequays, even a pair of Wookiees who'd abandoned their people's honor for credits. They came armed with everything from basic blaster pistols to military-grade disruptors, jetpacks to assault speeders, tracking droids to train tracking beasts. Keel monitored the guild frequencies from his workshop, translating the tactical chatter for Bruce. They organize into hunting packs. 5 groups of 9, with command structure and communication protocols. Coordinated search patterns across Mos Eisley, expanding outward. Professional military tactics. Who's commanding them? Unknown. But the discipline suggests Imperial training. Someone with formal military background. Bruce studied the holographic display showing hunter positions across the settlement. They were methodical, sweeping block by block, checking every shadow and rooftop. But they were also predictable. Military tactics in an urban environment followed patterns, created rhythms he could exploit. They're hurting me, Bruce said, tracing potential escape vectors on the display. Pushing toward the palace. They want me cornered against Jabba's security perimeter. Then you are trapped. Between the guild and the palace, you have nowhere to run. I'm not running anymore. Bruce secured his cowl, checking the upgraded systems one final time. I'm going to show them the difference between hunting prey and hunting predators. He departed Keel's workshop for what might be the last time, grappling into Mos Eisley's maze of structures as the second sun dipped toward the horizon. The hunters were converging on the Cantina district, the heart of their operations, where the guild maintained its local headquarters. They expected him to avoid it. Instead, Bruce went straight there. The guild's headquarters occupied a converted warehouse, 3 stories of reinforced durasteel with sensor arrays and defensive turrets. 12 hunters guarded the perimeter, their positions overlapping to eliminate blind spots. Inside, the command center coordinated the search, tracking reports from field teams through a sophisticated communications network. Bruce spent 20 minutes observing from a distant rooftop, mapping guard rotations and sensor coverage. The security was tight, but no system was perfect. Sensors could be fooled. Guards could be distracted. And every fortress had weaknesses if you knew where to look. He started with the power grid. Mos Eisley's electrical infrastructure was a patchwork of mismatched systems, cobbled together over decades by a dozen different engineers. Bruce had studied the layout during his weeks of reconnaissance, identifying junction points and vulnerabilities. Now he moved through the maintenance tunnels beneath the district, accessing control panels that regulated power distribution. 3 carefully placed EMP charges later, and the entire Cantina district went dark. The hunters' comms erupted with confusion. Emergency lights flickered on, bathing the streets in red. Backup generators hummed to life, but not quickly enough. For 90 seconds, the Guild's headquarters was blind, its sensors offline, its defenses vulnerable. Bruce used 60 of those seconds to reach the building's roof. The remaining 30, he spent cutting through the emergency access hatch with a laser torch from his utility belt. He dropped into the command center as the main power restored, landing among 6 hunters hunched over holographic displays and communication consoles. They barely had time to register his presence before he struck. The first hunter, a Rodian communications specialist, went down with a nerve strike. The second reached for her blaster, Bruce's batarang disarmed her, a follow-up strike rendering her unconscious. The third and fourth hunters were weakways, larger and stronger, coordinating their assault. Bruce used their size against them, redirecting momentum, exploiting the confined space. One crashed into a console, circuitry sparking. The other took an elbow to the temple and collapsed. The fifth hunter was human, female, wearing Imperial officer's insignia on modified armor. The commander. She drew a vibroblade instead of a blaster, smart, understanding that energy weapons risked damaging the equipment they were protecting. "So you're the Bat," she said, falling into a combat stance that suggested formal military training. "I expected someone larger. Most people do." They circled in the cramped command center, glass crunching under their boots. She feinted left, struck right, Bruce parried, testing her skill. Former Imperial Special Forces, his mind catalogued, probably discharged for independent thinking. Dangerous. She pressed her advantage, using the vibroblade's reach to keep him at distance. Bruce gave ground deliberately, letting her think she controlled the engagement. When she overextended, a thrust aimed at his midsection, he trapped the blade arm, twisted, and delivered a strike that numbed her entire shoulder. The vibroblade clattered to the floor. "Who hired you?" Bruce asked, maintaining the arm lock. She laughed bitterly. "You think this is about credits? The Guild put out the contract, but half these hunters are here because you humiliated them. You broke their code. Made them look weak. Their code permits slavery and murder. It deserves to be broken." Noble words from someone who beats people unconscious and leaves them in the sand. She tried to break the lock. Bruce tightened his grip. "You're not so different from us. We're all just trying to survive in a galaxy that doesn't care. I'm nothing like you." Bruce applied pressure to a nerve cluster. She went limp, unconscious. He lowered her to the floor carefully, then turned his attention to the command center systems. The holographic displays showed hunter positions across Mos Eisley, including 3 teams converging on his current location. They detected the intrusion, realized their headquarters was compromised. Bruce uploaded a virus from his Cowl's computer into the Guild's network, a custom program that would corrupt their tracking algorithms and introduce false position data. Not enough to completely blind them, but enough to buy him time and sow confusion. Then he heard it, the distinctive scream of jetpacks approaching from multiple vectors. Bruce grappled through a window as the first hunters breached the command center. He swung across the street, cape billowing, landed on an opposite rooftop and kept moving. Blaster fire carved through the air behind him, the hunters coordinating their pursuit with practiced efficiency. They'd learned from previous encounters. They weren't trying to surround him, instead, they were driving him toward predetermined kill zones, places where their numerical advantage became overwhelming. Bruce recognized the tactic. It was sound. It might even work. But he'd spent the last 3 days preparing for exactly this scenario. The first kill zone was a marketplace square, open ground surrounded by rooftops where hunters could fire from elevated positions. Bruce approached at full sprint, seeming oblivious to the trap. 10 hunters emerged from concealment, weapons trained on the square's single entrance. Bruce triggered a remote charge he'd planted 2 days ago. The entrance's archway collapsed in a shower of rubble, cutting off the hunters' line of fire. He grappled to the rooftops, not away from the hunters, but toward them. They scattered, not expecting him to attack directly into their superior numbers. Chaos erupted. Bruce moved through them like a dark wind, striking and vanishing before they could coordinate counterattacks. Batarangs flashed in the twilight, disabling weapons and targeting jetpack controls. Smoke pellets transformed the rooftops into a maze of obscured sight lines. The hunters fired blindly, hitting each other as often as their intended target. 90 seconds later, 8 hunters lay unconscious. The remaining 2 fled. The second kill zone was the spaceport's maintenance yards, narrow corridors between grounded ships. Bruce approached cautiously, sensors detecting 12 thermal signatures in ambush positions. Too many. But retreating would let them regroup, bring fresh hunters into the pursuit. He needed to thin their numbers. Bruce accessed the maintenance yard's fuel depot controls through his cowl's wireless interface. The guild had secured the physical entrances, but they'd forgotten about electronic access. He triggered a controlled venting of Tabana gas, the same substance used in blaster power packs, flooding the kill zone with flammable vapor. Then he threw an incendiary batarang. The explosion wasn't massive. Bruce had calculated the gas concentration carefully. But it was enough. The hunters stumbled from their positions, some with minor burns, all of them disoriented. Bruce struck while they were vulnerable, disabling them with methodical precision. 13 hunters down. 26 more active. And now they knew he was specifically targeting their ambush points, turning their own tactics against them. The guild commanders, whoever was directing operations after Bruce had neutralized their headquarters, shifted strategy. Instead of kill zones, they began collapsing the search perimeter, forcing Bruce into an ever-shrinking area of operation. It was a siege mentality, designed to exhaust him through attrition rather than direct confrontation. Bruce recognized the shift. He also recognized he was running out of options. Every engagement depleted his equipment, batarangs, smoke pellets, EMP charges. And while he could fight indefinitely, his equipment couldn't. Time to change the battlefield entirely. Bruce turned toward the one place the hunters couldn't follow without consequences, Jabba's palace. The crime lord's territory was sacrosanct, even the guild wouldn't violate it without permission. If Bruce could reach the palace perimeter, the hunters would have to withdraw or risk starting a war with the Hutts. Of course, that meant Bruce would be facing Jabba's security instead. But he'd been planning that assault for weeks. Time to accelerate the timeline. He broke from Mos Eisley's outer districts, commandeering a speeder bike and racing across the open desert. The hunters followed, 23 speeders and jetpack-equipped flyers, forming a pursuit formation that kicked up a dust storm visible for kilometers. The palace loomed ahead, ancient stone glowing in the last light of the setting suns. Defense turrets tracked the approaching vehicles, but didn't fire, yet. Jabba's guards on the walls watched with weapons ready, uncertain whether to engage. Bruce angled his speeder toward the palace's western approach, where the thermal exhaust system vented heat through disguised ports in the stone. He jumped from the speeder at full speed, grappling to the wall as the vehicle crashed into the sand. The hunters opened fire, but he was already inside the exhaust system, pulling himself through passages barely wide enough for human infiltration. Behind him, the hunters reached the palace perimeter and skidded to a halt. One attempted to follow, a Gamorrean guard's blaster bolt vaporized him mid-flight. The rest withdrew to minimum safe distance, forming a perimeter, settling in to wait. Inside Jabba's palace, alarms began to sound. Guards converged on the exhaust system, blocking exits. Automated defense systems activated throughout the structure. Bruce pulled himself deeper into the palace's infrastructure, following the schematics he'd memorized. He was committed now, no retreat, only forward. The guild behind him, Jabba's forces ahead, and somewhere in this fortress, slaves who needed rescuing and a crime lord who needed to understand that even in the Outer Rim, there were lines that couldn't be crossed. The Bat had entered the palace. And Jabba the Hutt was about to learn why Gotham's criminals feared the dark. Jabba's palace was a labyrinth of stone corridors, slave quarters, torture chambers, and opulent halls where the Hutt conducted his criminal empire. Bruce navigated through ventilation shafts and maintenance tunnels, his cowl's sensors mapping the structure's layout while avoiding the patrol patterns of Gamorrean guards and the more dangerous Weequay enforcers who served as Jabba's inner circle. The thermal exhaust route deposited him in the sublevel, the palace's foundation, carved from ancient stone and expanded over centuries. The air here was thick with moisture and the stench of captivity. Slave pens lined the corridors, their occupants huddled in darkness, eyes reflecting what little light filtered through barred windows. Bruce's cowl counted 37 captives in the immediate area. Twi'leks, humans, Rhodians, even a young Wookiee separated from her clan. They watched him materialize from the shadows with expressions ranging from hope to terror, uncertain whether this armored figure represented salvation or a new threat. "I'm here to free you," Bruce said quietly in Basic, his cowl translating into several common languages simultaneously. "But you need to stay quiet until I neutralize the guards." A Twi'lek woman, scarred and hollow-eyed, spoke in a whisper. "There are too many. Gamorreans on every level. The Weequays never sleep. And the rancor," she gestured toward a massive pit at the corridor's end, where something enormous shifted in the darkness below. "I know about the rancor." Bruce had studied the creature through surveillance footage intercepted from the palace's security systems. A semi-sentient predator, 15 feet tall, kept starved to ensure it remained aggressive. Jabba fed it enemies and entertainment alike. "What's the guard rotation schedule?" "Every 2 hours. Next change is in," she glanced at a chronometer on the wall. 17 minutes. Bruce nodded. 17 minutes to reach the slave pen control systems, bypass the locks, and establish an escape route before the guards cycled through. Tight, but manageable. He moved deeper into the sublevel, staying to the shadows. 2 Gamorrean guards blocked the corridor ahead, their bulk filling the passage, vibroaxes resting on shoulders. They were discussing something in guttural Gamorrean, a card game, his cowl translated, arguing over who cheated whom. Bruce dropped from the ceiling between them. The first guard barely registered his presence before a nerve strike paralyzed his arm, the vibroaxe clattering to the stone floor. The second swung his weapon in a wide arc. Bruce ducked under it, struck the guard's knee with precisely calculated force, and followed with an elbow to the snout. Both Gamorreans collapsed, unconscious. The control room was ahead, behind a reinforced door with electronic locks. Bruce attached a bypass device from his utility belt, letting it cycle through access codes while his cowl monitored approaching footsteps. The door hissed open 30 seconds later, revealing a cramped space filled with monitoring equipment and control panels. The technical specifications were straightforward, electromagnetic locks tied to a central power grid. Bruce accessed the system, his cowl's computer interfacing with the palace's network. Security was primitive by Wayne Enterprises standards, relying on physical barriers rather than sophisticated encryption. He uploaded a cascading unlock program, set to activate on his command. Every slave pen in the palace would open simultaneously, creating chaos that would spread the guards thin and allow the captives to scatter in multiple directions. But first, he needed to address the rancor. Bruce descended to the pit level, where the creature's lair occupied a chamber carved from solid rock. The beast itself was massive, reptilian, with arms capable of crushing durasteel and jaws that could bite a landspeeder in half. It paced in its confinement, agitated, hungry, staring up at the grating above where Jabba occasionally dropped victims for entertainment. Bruce studied the chamber's architecture. The rancor couldn't be killed, it was a semi-intelligent creature, enslaved and abused like the beings in the pens above. But it could be contained more permanently, or better yet, freed to serve as a distraction. The chamber's door was controlled by a massive gate mechanism, counterweight and operated by a lever in the guard station. Bruce examined the mechanism, calculating load-bearing capacity and structural weaknesses. If he could jam the door open after releasing the rancor, it would create a one-way path. The creature could leave, but couldn't return to its pit. Perfect chaos. Bruce set shaped charges on the gate's locking mechanism, then activated the unlock program. Throughout Jabba's palace, slave pen doors hissed open simultaneously. Confused shouts echoed through stone corridors as captives stumbled into freedom, uncertain whether to run or wait for guards to restore order. The guards chose violence. Blaster fire erupted on the upper levels. Gamorreans bellowed orders in their guttural language, trying to restore control. The weak-way enforcers moved with more precision, herding slaves back toward confinement. Bruce triggered the gate charges. The mechanism exploded, and the rancor's door ground open with the screech of tortured metal. The beast emerged from its pit with a roar that shook the palace foundations. It had been starved, tortured, confined in darkness for years. Now it was free, and its rage was absolute. Gamorrean guards rushed to contain it, the rancor swept them aside like toys, crushing armor and bone with casual swipes of its claws. Bruce grappled to the upper levels as the creature rampaged through the sublevel, following its nose toward the palace's main chambers where Jabba conducted business. The chaos was spreading, slaves fleeing in every direction, guards trying to establish defensive positions, the palace's communication systems overloading with conflicting orders. And then Bruce heard a voice that cut through the pandemonium, amplified by the palace's speakers, "Bring me the one called the Bat. Alive. 10,000 credits to whoever captures him." Jabba had entered the game personally. Bruce made his way toward the throne room, following the sound of that massive, slug-like voice. The route took him through the palace's upper levels, past chambers where Jabba's court had gathered, smugglers, bounty hunters, entertainers, all of them armed and now searching for the intruder who'd violated the Hutt's sanctum. A protocol droid intercepted him in a hallway, its photoreceptors flashing alarm. "Halt! This area is restricted to," Bruce's EMP batarang silenced it mid-sentence, the droid toppling with a clatter. 4 weak-way guards rounded a corner, weapons raised. Bruce threw smoke pellets and attacked through the obscuring cloud, striking with precision. These weren't the clumsy Gamorreans, the weakways were skilled fighters, coordinating their defense, using the narrow corridor to limit his mobility. But Bruce had fought in tighter spaces, against more skilled opponents. He used their coordination against them, letting them block each other's attacks, exploiting the microsecond gaps in their formation. 2 went down quickly. The third managed to fire his blaster, the bolt grazed Bruce's shoulder, burning through the outer layer of his suit before the armor plating beneath stopped it. Pain flared, but Bruce compartmentalized it, striking the shooter with a nerve cluster technique that paralyzed his trigger hand. The 4th weakway drew a vibroblade. Bruce disarmed him with a joint lock and put him down with a calculated strike. The throne room doors loomed ahead, massive and ornate, carved with Huttese script proclaiming Jabba's power and dominion. Bruce's cowl detected dozens of life signs beyond, the Hutt's full court, assembled to witness his capture or death. He pushed the doors open and walked in. Jabba the Hutt occupied a raised platform at the chamber's far end, his massive bulk draped across cushions, tail coiled beneath him. His eyes, small, cold, calculating, fixed on Bruce with predatory interest. Around him, the court fell silent. Bib Fortuna, his majordomo, Salacious Crumb, the cackling Kowakian monkey lizard, 24 armed guards positioned at strategic points throughout the chamber. And sitting casually on a side platform, armor-scarred but intact, was Boba Fett. "So," Jabba rumbled in Huttese, his words translated by Bruce's cowl. "The creature who disrupts my operations finally shows himself. Tell me, Bat, what arrogance brings you to my palace? Do you think your reputation protects you here?" Bruce surveyed the room, calculating angles and exits. The throne room was designed to intimidate: high ceilings, limited cover, clear sight lines for the guards. A kill box, essentially. But every kill box had weaknesses if you knew where to apply pressure. "Your operations include slavery," Bruce said, his voice carrying through the chamber. "Children taken from their families. Beings sold like property. That ends tonight." Jabba's laugh was a wet, rolling sound. "You freed 37 slaves. I own thousands across Tatooine. Tens of thousands across the Outer Rim. You are a minor inconvenience, nothing more. Then you won't mind if I continue being inconvenient." "Oh, I mind very much." Jabba gestured with a stubby arm. "But you will not continue. Fett, you said you could capture him. Prove it. I want him alive to decorate my court. A warning to others who might challenge my authority." Boba Fett stood, checking his weapons with practiced efficiency. "The bounty stands. Double it. 20,000 credits if you bring him to me breathing." Fett's helmet turned toward Bruce. "Last chance to walk away from this. Jabba's hospitality isn't known for its mercy. Neither is mine." The throne room erupted into violence. Guards opened fire from elevated positions, their blaster bolts converging on where Bruce had been standing, but he was already moving, cape billowing as he grappled to the ceiling support beams. Fett's jetpack ignited, the hunter pursuing him into the vertical space above the court. Bruce swung between the beams, using them for cover while throwing batarangs at the guards below. He targeted their weapons, not their bodies, disabling blasters with cortosis-edged projectiles, creating momentary gaps in their fire pattern. Fett fired his carbine in controlled bursts, anticipating Bruce's movement, forcing him to constantly adjust trajectory. "You're cornered," Fett called out, his voice amplified by his helmet. "No escape routes. No reinforcements. Just you against a room full of professionals. Then it's a fair fight." Bruce dropped a cluster of smoke pellets, filling the throne room with obscuring haze. The guards fired blindly. Fett switched to thermal imaging. But Bruce had learned from their previous encounter. He triggered heat packs scattered throughout the chamber, creating dozens of false thermal signatures that overwhelmed Fett's sensors. In the confusion, Bruce descended to the throne platform itself. Jabba's guards formed a protective cordon, but they were positioned to defend against threats from the crowd, not from above. Bruce dropped among them, striking with the efficiency of someone who'd done this thousands of times. Gamorreans went down. Weakways collapsed. Within seconds, only Bib Fortuna remained, the Twi'lek majordomo backed against Jabba's platform, terror written across his face. Bruce grabbed him. "Release the slaves. All of them. Or I demonstrate what happens to crime lords who deal in misery." Jabba hissed something in Huttese, an order to his guards. But they were down, scattered, disorganized. The Hutt was vulnerable for perhaps the first time in his centuries-long reign. Fett landed on the platform, weapon trained on Bruce. "Step away from Fortuna. This doesn't have to end with you in carbonite. No. It ends with Jabba understanding his operations on Tatooine are finished. One being cannot topple an empire," Jabba said, his voice steady despite the proximity of violence. "I have resources you cannot imagine. Allies throughout the criminal underworld. Even if you kill me here, my organization continues. You accomplish nothing. I accomplish hope." Bruce released Fortuna, turning to face the Hutt directly. "Every slave you own saw the pens open tonight. Every guard who tried to stop them failed. By morning, word will spread across the Outer Rim. Jabba the Hutt was challenged in his own palace, and the challenger walked away. Your reputation bleeds with every telling." Jabba's eyes narrowed. "You think reputation matters more than power? I know it does. Power without fear is just strength. And after tonight, beings will remember they don't have to be afraid of you." For a long moment, silence held the throne room. Then Jabba made a sound that might have been grudging respect. You are either brave or insane. Perhaps both. Fett, stand down. The hunter's helmet tilted slightly, surprised. The bounty is meaningless if it costs me more in reputation than it gains in credits. Jabba shifted his bulk, regarding Bruce with calculating interest. I propose an arrangement, Bat. You have proven formidable. Work for me. Hunt my enemies instead of interfering with my operations. I will pay handsomely and provide resources even your impressive skills cannot match alone. Bruce almost laughed. You think I came here for employment? I think you came here to change things. Working within my organization, you could protect those you deem innocent. Continue your crusade against me, and you simply create a power vacuum that someone worse will fill. It was a pragmatic argument, the kind of utilitarian logic that appealed to people who'd seen too much of the galaxy's darkness. And in another life, another circumstance, Bruce might have considered it, infiltrating the organization from within, using Jabba's resources against him. But he'd learned long ago that compromising with evil never ended in anything but more evil. No deal, Bruce said. But I'll give you one chance. Release every slave in your possession, shut down your trafficking operations, and I'll leave Tatooine. Refuse, and I dismantle your empire piece by piece. Jabba's laugh rumbled through the chamber. Rejected. Guards, seize him. The throne room doors burst open. But instead of more guards, the guild's hunters poured in, 23 of them, weapons drawn, surrounding the platform from every angle. They'd breached the palace perimeter during the chaos, following Bruce inside. And standing at their head was the Imperial-trained commander Bruce had fought in Mos Eisley. Jabba the Hutt, she announced, voice carrying military authority. The guild has decided your hospitality toward the Bat constitutes interference with our contract. We're collecting him. Now. The chamber held its breath. Two forces, Jabba's criminal empire and the guild's hunter army, staring at each other across raised weapons, with Batman standing between them. Boba Fett broke the silence. This is going to be messy. And then, chaos erupted once more. The throne room became a war zone in the span of a heartbeat. Jabba's remaining guards opened fire on the guild hunters who'd violated his sanctum. The hunters returned fire, targeting both the guards and Batman with equal fervor. Blaster bolts crisscrossed the chamber in a lethal light show, scorching ancient stone and vaporizing decorative tapestries. Bruce moved through the chaos like a shadow given purpose. He wasn't fighting for either side, he was fighting against both, using their conflict as cover while systematically disabling combatants. A Gamorrean guard swung his vibro axe at a Rodian hunter. Bruce redirected the blow into a support pillar, then put both down with nerve strikes. Two weakways coordinated fire on a cluster of hunters. Bruce's batarangs disarmed them before they could kill anyone. Boba Fett tracked him through the pandemonium, jetpack providing aerial superiority. The hunter's carbine barked in controlled bursts, not trying to kill Bruce but to herd him into vulnerable positions. You've got about 30 seconds before someone gets lucky, Fett called over the weapon fire. Last chance, surrender to me, and I'll get you out of here alive. I don't surrender. Bruce grappled to the throne platform support beams, swinging above the melee. Below, Jabba was retreating through a concealed passage, Bib Fortuna and Salacious Crumb scrambling after him. The Hutt's priority was survival, not revenge, pragmatic to the end. The guild commander rallied her hunters with military precision. Alpha Team, secure the exits. Bravo, advance on the platform. I want the Bat in binders in 60 seconds. Her hunters moved with coordinated efficiency, suppressing Jabba's remaining guards while closing the perimeter around Bruce's position. They'd learned from previous encounters, instead of pursuing individually, they maintained formation, covering each other's advances, eliminating his ability to pick them off one by one. Bruce assessed his options. The throne room had 3 exits, The main doors where the hunters had entered, the concealed passage Jabba had used, and a ventilation shaft in the ceiling that his cowl's sensors had mapped during the initial confrontation. The main doors were blocked by guild forces. The concealed passage led deeper into the palace, where more of Jabba's security would be rallying. That left the ventilation shaft. He fired his grapnel at the ceiling grating, the lines singing out with magnetic acceleration. But before he could retract, Fett's fibercord whip wrapped around the line, yanking it off trajectory. The grapnel struck stone instead of the grating, and Bruce plummeted back toward the platform. He twisted mid-fall, cape spreading to control descent, and landed in a crouch among a cluster of hunters. They converged on him instantly, 5 professionals with stun batons and capture nets, equipment designed specifically for taking dangerous prey alive. Bruce struck with brutal efficiency, knee to solar plexus, elbow to temple, palm strike to throat. But there were too many, and they were too coordinated. A net wrapped around his shoulders. Bruce severed it with a blade from his gauntlet, but the momentary entanglement let another hunter close with a stun baton. The weapon crackled against his armor's insulation, pain radiating through his nervous system. Bruce fought through it, disarming the hunter and using the stun baton on 2 others before his muscles seized from residual charge. "Got him," the commander shouted. "All units converge." The ranker's roar shook the throne room. The beast had followed its rage through the palace corridors, drawn by the sound of combat and the scent of potential prey. It smashed through the throne room's side entrance, 15 feet of reptilian fury and hunger, and immediately attacked the nearest targets, which happened to be guild hunters. Chaos redoubled. Hunters scattered, firing at the ranker with weapons designed for humanoid targets, not prehistoric predators. Blaster bolts scorched its hide but failed to penetrate deeply enough to cause serious damage. The creature swept 3 hunters aside with one massive arm, their armor crumpling like foil. Bruce used the distraction to break free, severing the remaining capture net and grappling toward the ventilation shaft. This time, Fett was occupied with the ranker, his jetpack's flamethrower attempting to drive the beast back. The grapnel's magnetic clamp secured to the ceiling grating, and Bruce retracted, pulling himself up and through as blaster fire chased him into darkness. The ventilation system was tight, barely wide enough for human passage, but it led throughout the palace's upper levels. Bruce navigated by his cowl's mapping algorithms, following pathways that would take him away from both Jabba's security and the guild's hunters. Behind him, the sounds of combat faded, replaced by the ranker's triumphant roars and the commander's shouted orders to fall back and regroup. He emerged in the palace's eastern wing, a section devoted to Jabba's personal quarters and treasuries. The corridors here were opulent, decorated with stolen art and trophies from countless victims. Bruce's cowl detected minimal security presence. Everyone had converged on the throne room to deal with the multiple crises erupting throughout the structure. Perfect opportunity. Bruce accessed the palace's computer network through a maintenance terminal, his cowl's systems interfacing with the primitive security architecture. He navigated through data layers, searching for what he needed: records of Jabba's slave operations, financial accounts, blackmail material on corrupt officials, communication logs with other crime lords. Everything that would be necessary to dismantle the Hutt's empire from within. He downloaded terabytes of incriminating data, compressing it into his cowl's storage systems. This information could expose Jabba's operations across the Outer Rim, reveal his connections to imperial officials, prove his involvement in everything from spice smuggling to political assassinations. In the right hands, rebel intelligence, independent journalists, rival crime lords looking for leverage, it would be devastating. "Clever," Boba Fett's voice said from behind him. "While everyone's distracted by the rancor and the guild assault, you're stealing Jabba's secrets. Professional work." Bruce turned to find the hunter standing in the corridor, carbine lowered but ready. Fett's armor showed fresh scorch marks from the throne room battle, but he seemed uninjured. They regarded each other in the opulent hallway, 2 professionals who'd fought multiple times without either gaining decisive advantage. "You let me escape the throne room," Bruce said, recognizing the tactical gap that had allowed his grapnel to succeed. "Why?" Because watching you die to a rancor or get captured by amateurs offends my professional standards. Fett checked his carbine's charge indicator casually. And because I'm curious what you'll do with that data. Jabba's empire has needed disrupting for years. Too comfortable. Too arrogant. You work for him. I work for credits. But I respect competence more than credits. And you, Fett gestured at the terminal, the palace around them, the chaos Bruce had orchestrated. You've accomplished in weeks what most beings couldn't do in years. Made the guild look like amateurs. Breached Jabba's palace. Freed his slaves. All without killing anyone. Is there a point to this conversation, or are you stalling while backup arrives? Fett's helmet tilted slightly, the hunter equivalent of a smile. The point is a proposal. The guild wants you dead or captured. Jabba wants you as a trophy. But there are other options in this galaxy. Other organizations that could use someone with your skills. I'm not joining anyone's organization. Not even the rebellion. Bruce paused. What do you know about the rebellion? I know they operate on Tatooine through hidden cells. I know they'd pay handsomely for Jabba's financial records, specifically his transactions with Imperial officials. And I know they have resources that could help someone stranded far from home. Fett's visor reflected the terminal's glow. That's what you are, isn't it? Stranded. No ship, no way off planet, fighting a war you didn't choose because it's the only thing you know how to do. Bruce's jaw tightened. Fett was too perceptive, reading between the lines of his actions to deduce motivations that Bruce hadn't fully admitted to himself. What do you want? I want to collect the guild's bounty on you. But I also respect the game you're playing. So here's the deal, I give you 48 hours to complete whatever you're planning. You give me something I can bring back to the guild, proof you've left Tatooine, evidence you're dead, something that closes the contract and lets everyone save face. And in exchange? In exchange, I put you in contact with the rebellion. You give them Jabba's data, they give you resources. Maybe even help finding a way home, if that's what you're after. Fett lowered his carbine completely. 48 hours. Then I come collecting, and we do this for real. Bruce studied the hunter, analyzing micro-movements and vocal stress patterns. Fett was sincere, or as sincere as a professional killer could be. This wasn't a trap, it was a professional courtesy between operators who recognized each other's capabilities. Why help me at all? Because the galaxy needs people like you more than it needs people like me. Fett turned to leave, then paused. And because watching you humiliate the guild has been the most entertaining contract I've taken in years. 48 hours, bat. Make them count. The hunter disappeared into the palace corridors, jetpack firing briefly to carry him toward an external exit. Bruce was left alone with Jabba's stolen data and a decision that would determine his next move in this strange galaxy. He could take Fett's deal, contact the rebellion, leverage Jabba's information for resources and possible transport off Tatooine. Or he could continue his war against the Outer Rim's criminal element, knowing it would eventually bring down forces he couldn't defeat alone. The pragmatic choice was obvious. But Bruce Wayne had never been entirely pragmatic when innocents were suffering. He downloaded the final data files and erased his presence from the palace's systems. The guild would regroup, Jabba would fortify his defenses, and within days this opportunity would close forever. But in those 48 hours, Bruce could accomplish what needed doing. He made his way to the palace's sublevel, where the freed slaves had scattered during the chaos. Many had fled into the desert, but others, the young, the injured, those with nowhere else to go, had hidden in the maintenance tunnels, afraid to emerge until they knew it was safe. Bruce found them huddled in the darkness, 17 beings who'd survived Jabba's cruelty through sheer will. They looked at him with desperate hope, and in their eyes he saw the same expression he'd seen countless times in Gotham, people who needed someone to believe the world could be better. I need your help, Bruce told them. In 48 hours, every slave on Tatooine is going to be freed. But to make that happen, I need information on where Jabba keeps his secondary holdings. Who knows about his operations beyond this palace? A human woman, the same one he'd freed from the transport weeks ago, stepped forward. I was an accountant before they took me. I processed shipments through his warehouses in Mos Espa. I know where the records are kept. Then we start there. Over the next hour, Bruce organized the freed slaves into an intelligence network. They knew Tatooine's underworld from the inside, understood the routes and schedules of Jabba's operations, could identify weak points that no external observer would notice. Together, they mapped targets across the planet, warehouses, spice dens, slave markets, corrupt officials on Jabba's payroll. By dawn, Bruce had a comprehensive plan to dismantle the Hutt's empire. It would require precision timing, coordinated strikes, and resources he didn't yet have. But with the rebellion's help and the intelligence network he'd just built, it was possible. First, though, he needed to make contact with people who fought for something larger than survival, people who believed, as he did, that tyranny could be defeated through courage and sacrifice. He needed to find the rebellion. Bruce left the palace through the same exhaust system he'd entered, emerging into the desert night as twin moons rose over the dunes. Behind him, Jabba's fortress was in chaos, guards searching for intruders, the rancors still causing havoc in the lower levels, the guild's hunters retreating to regroup. Ahead lay Mos Eisley, where rebel agents operated in secret, waiting for someone bold enough or crazy enough to challenge the Empire's grip on the Outer Rim. Batman was about to show them what Gotham's Dark Knight could accomplish when he believed in a cause larger than himself. 48 hours. The clock was running. The rebellion's contact point was a moisture farm 30 kilometers south of Mos Eisley, abandoned according to official records, but Bruce's cowl detected power signatures and communication arrays that suggested otherwise. He approached on foot through the pre-dawn darkness, cape blending with the shadows of rocky outcroppings, every sense alert for surveillance or defensive measures. The farm appeared derelict, rusted vaporators, collapsed storage buildings, sand drifting through broken doorways. But Bruce's sensors picked up pressure plates around the perimeter, hidden cameras tracking approaches from multiple angles, and a hardened bunker beneath the main structure. Professional security, designed to look like neglect. He triggered the cameras deliberately, letting whoever monitored them see his approach. A voice crackled through concealed speakers, young, female, cautious, that's far enough. State your business or leave. Quickly. I'm looking for people who fight the Empire, Bruce said. I have information they'll want. Silence stretched for 30 seconds. Then, remove your weapons and approach the North Vaporator. Slowly. Any sudden moves and you'll discover our hospitality isn't friendly. Bruce complied, placing his visible weapons, batarangs, grapnel launcher, on the sand. He kept the cowl's concealed equipment, knowing they'd search him regardless but gambling they wouldn't find everything. He approached the vaporator as instructed, a section of the ground irised open, revealing a ladder descending into darkness. The bunker below was cramped but functional, communications equipment, weapons lockers, a holographic tactical display showing Imperial troop movements across Tatooine. 3 rebels occupied the space, a human woman in her 20s with a blaster carbine trained on Bruce, a Bothan male monitoring the communications array, and a Quarren seated at the tactical display, tentacles writhing as he processed data. Remove the helmet, the woman ordered. I want to see who's crazy enough to waltz into a rebel safe house wearing guild armor. It's not guild armor. Bruce unsealed his cowl, revealing his face. Let them see he was human, at least. My name is Bruce Wayne. I'm not from this galaxy. And I have data that will cripple Jabba the Hutt's operations across the Outer Rim. The 3 rebels exchanged glances. The Bothan spoke first, his voice gravelly, we've heard about you. The Bat. Guild channels have been screaming about you for weeks. You're either the bravest fool we've met or the most dangerous asset that's walked through our door. I'm someone who wants the same thing you do, freedom for people living under tyranny. The Quarren's tentacles stopped moving. Noble words. But the rebellion has lost operatives trusting outsiders who spoke noble words. Why should we believe you're not an Imperial agent provocateur? Bruce pulled a data chip from his utility belt, one of dozens he'd prepared with copies of Jabba's files. This contains financial records proving Imperial governors on 3 Outer Rim worlds are taking bribes from Jabba's organization. Communications logs showing they coordinate slave raids together. Evidence that will turn public opinion against the Empire on a dozen systems. He placed the chip on the table. The Quarren inserted it into the tactical display. Holographic data cascaded through the air, transaction records, encrypted communications, surveillance footage of Imperial officers meeting with Jabba's lieutenants. The 3 rebels absorbed it in stunned silence. "This is extensive," the woman breathed. "If verified, this could spark uprisings on multiple worlds. Discredit Imperial administration throughout this sector." "It's verified. I pulled it directly from Jabba's palace systems last night." The Bothan's ears flattened against his skull, surprise or respect, Bruce couldn't tell which. "You infiltrated Jabba's palace, survived the guild's assault, and extracted classified data. Alone. I had help from freed slaves. And I'm offering more than just information." Bruce resealed his cowl, becoming the Bat once more. "In 48 hours, I'm launching simultaneous strikes against Jabba's major holdings on Tatooine, warehouses, slave markets, spice production facilities. If the rebellion provides support, we can free thousands of captives and destroy his infrastructure permanently." "That's suicide," the woman said flatly. "Jabba has hundreds of guards across those facilities. Automated defenses. And the guild will be waiting for you. Then help me make it less suicidal. You have weapons, explosives, personnel. I have tactical plans and intelligence on every target. Together, we can accomplish what neither of us could alone." The Quarren studied Bruce with black, unreadable eyes. "Why? You're not from here. You owe this galaxy nothing. Why risk your life for people you don't know?" Bruce thought of Gotham, of Crime Alley, of Thomas and Martha Wayne bleeding on the pavement, of the oath he'd sworn to ensure no one else suffered what he'd suffered. Because if you can help people and you don't, then their suffering becomes your responsibility. Location doesn't change that principle. The 3 rebels conferred in low voices, occasionally glancing at the holographic data still rotating in the air. Bruce waited, patient, knowing they were weighing operational security against opportunity. The rebellion operated on slim margins, every victory mattered, every resource had to be leveraged carefully. Finally, the woman turned back to him. "My name is Kira Vantal, cell leader for this sector. If we do this, and that's a significant if, it's on our terms. You follow rebel command structure. You don't take unnecessary risks. And you prove you can follow orders before we commit personnel to your plan." "What kind of proof?" "There's an Imperial supply depot outside Mos Eisley. Small garrison, maybe 15 stormtroopers, guarding munitions destined for the Star Destroyer in orbit. We've wanted to hit it for months but lacked the firepower. You take that depot with minimal collateral damage and bring back the munitions intact, we'll consider your proposal." Bruce nodded. "A test mission, standard procedure for vetting unknown assets. How long do I have?" 12 hours. The supply shuttle arrives at dawn tomorrow. After that, the munitions ship out and the opportunity closes. Then I'll need detailed intelligence on the depot's layout and patrol patterns." The Bothan activated a holographic schematic. 2-story structure, hardened against blaster fire. Guard towers at each corner with automated heavy repeaters. 15 stormtroopers in rotating shifts, 5 on perimeter patrol, 5 inside guarding the munitions, 5 off-duty in the barracks. Communications uplink to Imperial Command in Mos Eisley, 10-minute response time if they call for backup. Bruce studied the schematic, his mind already calculating approach vectors and tactical sequences. The depot was designed to resist frontal assault, but it wasn't designed to resist infiltration by someone who'd spent decades perfecting the art. What's the munitions composition? Thermal detonators, blaster power packs, and 3 crates of proton grenades. Unstable if mishandled. We need them intact for our operations. Understood. I'll need a distraction on the western approach, something to draw patrol attention without triggering full alert status. Kira frowned. What kind of distraction? Malfunctioning speeder bike, engine fire, something that requires investigation but doesn't immediately scream, attack. Can you arrange that? We have assets in Mos Eisley who can stage something. But if this goes wrong, it won't. Bruce's voice carried absolute conviction. I've done this before. Different galaxy, same principles. The rebels provided him with updated intelligence files and tactical equipment, enhanced reconnaissance gear, Imperial communication frequencies, charges configured for hardened structures. Bruce spent the remaining hours preparing, modifying his approach based on Stormtrooper doctrine and Imperial security protocols that Kira's cell had documented over months of observation. The depot was typical Imperial architecture, efficient, standardized, designed for rapid deployment rather than artistic merit. Bruce approached through the pre-dawn darkness, staying low in the rocky terrain that surrounded Mos Eisley. His cowl's sensors mapped the patrol patterns, confirming the intelligence Kira had provided. At precisely 0500 hours, the distraction activated. A speeder bike erupted in flames on the depot's western approach, its engine deliberately sabotaged to create spectacular but harmless pyrotechnics. 5 stormtroopers deployed to investigate, leaving the eastern approach minimally guarded. Bruce moved. He crossed open ground in 8 seconds, using a grapnel to reach the depot's roof before the remaining patrols completed their rotation. The roof access was sealed with standard Imperial locks, sophisticated by local standards, but Bruce's bypass tools cracked them in under a minute. He dropped into the structure's upper level, where off-duty stormtroopers slept in cramped barracks. They never woke. Bruce moved through the room applying pressure point techniques that induced unconsciousness, each trooper disabled in seconds. He confiscated their communication devices, severing their ability to call for backup, and locked the barracks door from outside. The munitions storage occupied the ground floor, guarded by 5 alert stormtroopers. Bruce couldn't approach directly without being detected. The room had clear sight lines and minimal cover. But it also had a ventilation system that connected to the facility's environmental controls. Bruce accessed the system through a maintenance panel, introducing a custom chemical compound from his utility belt into the air circulation. It was a refined version of his fear toxin, not the full-strength formula that induced hallucinations, but a milder variant that caused disorientation and mild paranoia. Within 90 seconds, the stormtroopers were reporting phantom movement, seeing threats that didn't exist. Their sergeant ordered a security sweep, dividing his forces to investigate the perceived intrusions. Bruce picked them off individually as they separated, disabling their armor's communication systems with EMP charges, then applying non-lethal takedowns. The sergeant was last, isolated in the munitions storage, confused and increasingly frightened as his entire squad went silent. Bruce dropped from the ceiling behind him. "Don't move." The sergeant spun, blaster rising. Bruce disarmed him with a wrist lock and put him down with a precise strike to the nerve cluster in his neck. 12 minutes from insertion to complete infiltration. No casualties. No alert sent to Imperial Command. Bruce secured the munitions crates and activated his communicator. "Vantal, depot is secure. Ready for extraction." Kira's voice crackled through, confirmed. "Extraction team inbound, ETA 6 minutes. That was impressive work. It's what I do." The rebels arrived in a disguised transport, loading the munitions with practiced efficiency. They left the unconscious stormtroopers secured in the barracks with their armor and weapons confiscated, humiliated but alive. By the time Imperial Command realized something was wrong, the rebels and their new asset would be long gone. Back at the safe house, Kira reviewed Bruce's infiltration recordings through the helmet cam footage he'd provided. The Quarren and Bothan watched over her shoulder, their expressions shifting from skepticism to respect as they witnessed the operation's execution. "You disabled 15 Imperial soldiers without firing a shot," the Bothan said quietly. "Without killing anyone. Most rebel operatives would have considered that impossible. Most operatives haven't spent decades perfecting non-lethal combat techniques." Bruce unsealed his cowl again, meeting their eyes directly. "I don't kill. Ever. It's not negotiable." "That could be a liability in what you're proposing," Kira said. "Jabba's operations won't be cleanly disabled through non-lethal force. Then we focus on infrastructure destruction and captive liberation. We don't have to kill guards to render the facilities inoperable." The three rebels conferred again, this time with less skepticism and more tactical consideration. Finally, Kira nodded. "All right. You've proven you can operate at the level you claim. We'll support your assault on Jabba's holdings, but with conditions. First, rebel personnel maintain operational independence. We're allies in this action, not subordinates. Second, any intelligence we gather becomes rebellion property for strategic analysis. Third, if the operation becomes compromised, we withdraw immediately. No heroic last stands." "Agreed." Bruce pulled out a datapad containing the tactical plans he'd been refining. "Here's what I'm proposing." For the next 6 hours, they planned. Bruce's intelligence from freed slaves combined with rebel reconnaissance to create a comprehensive operational picture. They identified primary targets: 3 major warehouses storing Jabba's spice inventory, 2 slave markets where captives were processed before sale, and the central command facility in Mos Eisley that coordinated logistics across Tatooine. The assault would be simultaneous, hitting all targets within a 30-minute window to prevent reinforcement and response. Rebel cells would handle explosives placement and perimeter security. Bruce would lead the direct action components, infiltrating secured facilities, disabling guards, freeing captives. It was ambitious bordering on reckless. But Kira admitted that if it succeeded, it would cripple Jabba's operations for months, possibly years. The economic damage alone would force him to consolidate holdings, making him vulnerable to rivals and imperial pressure. "One question," the Quarren said as they finalized details. "Boba Fett gave you 48 hours. That window closes tomorrow night. What happens when he comes collecting?" Bruce's expression was grim. "Then I deal with the best bounty hunter in the galaxy while you complete the mission. If I don't survive the encounter, the rebellion gets all of Jabba's intelligence files and complete operational plans. My work continues even if I don't." "That's not reassuring," Kira said. "It's not meant to be. It's reality." Bruce resealed his cowl, becoming the Bat once more. "We launch the operation at sunset tomorrow. Between now and then, I need your people positioned at each target location. When the shooting starts, it has to be coordinated perfectly." The rebels dispersed to their preparations, leaving Bruce alone in the safe house to review the plans one final time. Through the bunker's periscope, he watched twin suns climb toward zenith over the desert, painting the sand in shades of gold and amber. Somewhere out there, Boba Fett was counting down the hours. The guild was regrouping for their next assault. Jabba was fortifying his remaining holdings and calling in favors from across the criminal underworld. And the rebellion, this galaxy's desperate hope against overwhelming tyranny, was betting their resources and personnel on a stranger in a cape who claimed he never killed. Batman had faced impossible odds before. He'd stood against gods and monsters, survived battles that should have destroyed him, and emerged victorious through preparation, determination, and absolute refusal to quit. This would be no different. Tomorrow night, the Outer Rim would learn what happened when you gave the Dark Knight a cause worth fighting for. 24 hours until sunset. The final battle was coming. Sunset came to Tatooine with its usual violent beauty, twin suns descending in tandem, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold that seemed appropriate for what was about to unfold. Bruce watched from a rooftop in Mos Eisley, his cowl's sensors tracking rebel positions across the city while monitoring Imperial and Guild communications for signs they detected the coming storm. Kira's voice crackled through his comm, all teams in position. Warehouse Alpha has 6 guards visible, automated defenses online. Warehouse Beta shows 8 guards, heavier security. The slave markets are crowded, estimated 40 captives at each location, 20 guards combined. Central Command has Imperial Advisor presence, recommend extreme caution. Understood. Execute on my mark. Bruce checked his utility belt one final time. Everything was in place, the equipment he'd carefully rationed over weeks of operations, supplemented by rebel-supplied explosives and breaching charges. Remember, no lethal force unless absolutely necessary. We're liberating people, not creating martyrs. Copy that. Standing by. Bruce took a breath, centering himself the way he had before 1,000 operations in Gotham. Different city, different planet, different galaxy, but the fundamentals remained constant. Speed, precision, overwhelming initiative. Hit them before they knew they were in a fight. All teams, execute. Across Mos Eisley, the operation erupted simultaneously. Warehouse Alpha's perimeter defenses died first, rebel tech specialists remotely accessing Imperial standard security systems and introducing cascading failures that left the facility blind. Bruce grappled through the breach, landing among confused guards who were still trying to understand why their sensors had failed. He moved through them like a dark wind, nerve strikes, pressure points, precise applications of force that left bodies unconscious but breathing. The warehouse interior was massive, filled with crates of refined spice worth millions of credits. Bruce placed shaped charges at structural weak points while rebel demolitions experts worked the perimeter. They had 4 minutes before guard reinforcements arrived from other Jabba facilities, 4 minutes to place enough explosives to reduce the warehouse to rubble without killing the guards they'd already disabled. Charges set, Bruce reported, dragging the last unconscious guard to minimum safe distance. Detonating in 30 seconds. He triggered the countdown and grappled to high ground as the warehouse erupted in a controlled demolition. The explosion was precise, destroying inventory and infrastructure while directing the blast wave upward to minimize collateral damage. Millions of credits in spice inventory became smoke and ash, and Jabba's primary distribution point on Tatooine ceased to exist. Warehouse Alpha destroyed, Kira confirmed. Beta team reports similar success. Moving to Slave Market Delta. Bruce was already moving, cape billowing as he raced across Mos Eisley's rooftops toward the nearest slave market. The facility occupied a converted cantina, its barred windows and reinforced doors hiding the misery within. 20 captives according to rebel intelligence, humanoids of various species, waiting in cages for buyers who would never arrive. The guards here were more alert, warned by the explosions across the city. They'd fortified positions and called for backup. Bruce approached through the underground maintenance tunnels, emerging inside the facility's sublevel where the cages were kept. The captives stared at him with desperate hope and terror. Bruce worked quickly, bypassing electronic locks with his cowl's interface while monitoring guard positions above. "Stay quiet," he whispered in Galactic Basic, his voice modulated to sound calming rather than threatening. "Help is here. When I tell you to run, you run for the eastern exit. Rebels are waiting there with transport." A Twi'lek child, couldn't be more than 8 years old, reached through the bars toward him. "Are you real? Or are we dreaming?" Bruce knelt, meeting the child's eyes. "I'm real. And you're going home." The cage doors hissed open. Above, Bruce heard guards converging on the sublevel entrance. They detected the security breach. He had maybe 30 seconds before they came down the stairs with overwhelming force. "Go. Now. Eastern exit." The captives fled, 20 desperate beings racing toward freedom. Bruce positioned himself at the stairwell, blocking the guards' pursuit. They came down in a tactical stack, professional formation, coordinated fire discipline. Bruce met them with smoke pellets and flashbangs, turning the confined space into chaos, then waded into the confusion with methodical violence. These guards were better trained than most, probably ex-military who'd found post-imperial employment in the underworld. They fought with discipline, covering each other, trying to overwhelm him through coordinated assault. But Bruce had fought the League of Assassins in spaces like this, had perfected the art of confined space combat against multiple opponents. He used their coordination against them, forcing them to block each other's attacks, exploiting the microsecond gaps in their formation. Batarangs found weapons and pressure points. Grapnel line became a trip wire. His cape concealed movements and absorbed blaster bolts. Within 90 seconds, 8 guards lay unconscious and the captives were clear. Bruce planted incendiary charges throughout the facility, enough to gut the building but not enough to threaten adjacent structures. He was out the eastern exit when they detonated, flames consuming the slave market's infrastructure and records. Market Delta destroyed, captives secured, he reported. Moving to Central Command. Negative, Kira's voice cut through, urgent. Central Command has Imperial reinforcements, 2 squads of stormtroopers just deployed. We're withdrawing from that target. Too hot. The command center coordinates all of Jabba's operations. We take it down or this entire mission accomplishes nothing. Then you're going in alone. I'm not risking rebel lives against Imperial regulars for a symbolic victory. Bruce understood her logic. From a strategic perspective, she was right. But the command center contained intelligence that would prevent Jabba from rebuilding. Personnel records, financial accounts, communication protocols. Everything needed to ensure this victory was permanent rather than temporary. I'll handle it. Keep the captives moving toward extraction points. He approached the command center as the last sun dipped below the horizon, darkness spreading across Mos Eisley like a tide. The facility was a converted Imperial garrison building, hardened against assault, designed for exactly the kind of defense it was now mounting. Stormtroopers held the perimeter in disciplined formations, their white armor standing out against darkening stone. Bruce studied their positions, calculating approach vectors. Frontal assault was suicide, they had clear fields of fire and military discipline. But every defensive position had blind spots, especially when defenders focused on expected threat vectors. He went underground again, accessing the city's ancient sewer system. The tunnels beneath Mos Eisley predated Imperial occupation, carved by species whose names had been forgotten. They connected to the command center's sublevel through a maintenance shaft that was barely on the official schematics. Bruce emerged inside the facility's lower level, where civilian staff processed data and coordinated logistics. They scattered at his appearance, running for exits rather than fighting. He let them go. They weren't combatants, just people trying to survive in a corrupt system. The stormtroopers converged from above, their boots thundering on metal stairs. Bruce sealed the stairwell doors with quick-setting foam explosives, buying himself 90 seconds before they breached. He accessed the central computer system, downloading complete operational files while placing thermite charges on the server cores. Intruder in command center sublevel, a stormtrooper sergeant's voice echoed through internal comms. Requesting authorization for thermal detonators. Negative, an Imperial officer's voice cut through. Those files are too valuable. Deploy gas and capture him alive. Smart. But Bruce had prepared for chemical attacks. His cowl's filtration system engaged as white gas flooded the sublevel, Imperial issue riot control agent, designed to incapacitate without killing. Through the haze, he saw stormtroopers breaching the sealed doors, advancing in textbook formation with stun weapons ready. Bruce triggered the thermite charges. The server cores erupted in white-hot flame, vaporizing data and sending stormtroopers scrambling back from the intense heat. In the confusion, Bruce grappled to the ceiling, crawling through ventilation shafts as the sublevel filled with smoke and shouting. He emerged on the roof as Imperial reinforcements arrived, a patrol transport disgorging another squad of stormtroopers. They had him surrounded, every exit covered, nowhere to run. Exactly where he wanted them. "Surrender," the Imperial officer demanded through a loudspeaker. "You're surrounded. There's no escape." Bruce triggered his comm. "Kira, I need that air support you mentioned." "We don't have air support. We're ground insurgents." "Then improvise." "I'm transmitting coordinates." "Hit them in 30 seconds. "With what?" "Surprise them." Bruce dove from the roof as blaster fire erupted, grappling across the street to an adjacent building. Behind him, the stormtroopers reorganized, their officer coordinating pursuit through military comm channels. They were professionals, well-trained, and they had him outgunned and outmanned. Then Kira's air support arrived, a heavily modified cargo speeder screaming through Mos Eisley's streets at reckless velocity, its cargo bed filled with rebel fighters firing captured blasters and hurling thermal detonators. It wasn't sophisticated, wasn't military-grade support, but it was unexpected, and in that moment, unexpected was enough. The stormtroopers scattered, seeking cover. Bruce used the distraction to vanish into Mos Eisley's maze of alleys and underground passages, leaving the Imperials searching for a target that had already disappeared. "Thanks for the improvisation," Bruce said into his comm. Kira's laugh was slightly hysterical. "We just assaulted Imperial forces with a cargo speeder. Command is going to execute me." "Where are you?" "Safe. Mission accomplished. All targets destroyed, all captives freed, all intelligence secured or destroyed. Then get to the extraction point. We need to be off-planet before the Empire locks down the entire region." Bruce made his way through the darkened city, his cowl's sensors detecting increased Imperial presence, garrison forces deploying throughout Mos Eisley, checkpoints being established, patrol patterns tightening. The Empire was responding with overwhelming force, which meant the rebels had minutes, not hours, to evacuate. He reached the extraction point, a disguised landing pad on Mos Eisley's outskirts, where rebel ships waited with engines hot. Kira stood at the ramp of a battered freighter, waving frantically. "Move! Imperial forces are 3 blocks out." Bruce started toward the ship, then his cowl's sensors detected another signature. Familiar. Dangerous. Coming in fast. Boba Fett's slave. I descended from the darkness above, weapons hot, positioned between Bruce and the extraction ship. 48 hours are up, Bat, Fett's voice crackled through external speakers. Time to collect. The rebels raised weapons, but Fett's targeting systems locked onto them faster than they could fire. "Lower your weapons or I start with the ground targets. This is between me and him." Bruce stepped forward, away from the rebels. "Let them go. Your contract is with me." "Agreed." Fett's ship settled to ground level, the boarding ramp lowering. The hunter emerged, fully armed, moving with absolute confidence. "Heard about your performance tonight. Impressive. Reckless. Exactly what I expected. So what now? We fight until one of us can't continue?" "No. Now you make a choice." Fett gestured to his ship. "Come with me. I'll turn you over to the guild, collect my bounty. But I'll make sure the guild knows about these rebels, their operations, their safehouse locations. Everyone here dies or gets captured." Kira's voice was sharp through Bruce's comm. "Don't you dare. Or," Fett continued, "you get on one of those rebel ships and leave Tatooine. I tell the guild you died in the command center explosion. Everyone walks away. The rebellion gets a valuable asset, I get to close the contract with my reputation intact, and Jabba learns his empire isn't as untouchable as he believed. Why let me go? Because watching you dismantle Jabba's operations in one night has been the most entertaining contract I've had in a decade. And because," Fett paused, his helmet tilting slightly. "Because this galaxy needs people who believe things can change. Even if I think you're naive for believing it." Bruce studied the hunter, analyzing every micro-movement and vocal pattern. Fett was sincere, or as sincere as someone in his profession could be. This was professional respect, one operator acknowledging another's capabilities. If I leave, Jabba rebuilds. The guild continues preying on the desperate. Nothing fundamentally changes. Maybe. Or maybe you've planted a seed tonight that grows into something larger. The rebellion has your intelligence files. The slaves you freed are spreading stories across the outer rim. And every crime lord from here to the core is going to think twice before assuming they're untouchable. Fett's carbine lowered slightly. Sometimes that's the best you can accomplish, making the next person's fight a little easier. Bruce looked back at Kira and the rebels, then at the coordinates his cowl was displaying, the safe house, the freed slaves now in hiding, the intelligence that could spark uprisings across the sector. He'd come to Tatooine by accident, fought a war he hadn't chosen, and changed lives in ways he'd never fully understand. But Fett was right. If he stayed and died fighting, all that progress ended with him. If he left, the work continued through people who'd learned that tyranny could be resisted. Tell the guild I died well, Bruce said finally, walking toward the rebel ship. I will. And Bat? Fett called after him. If you ever need work in this galaxy, you've got my comm frequency. Professionals like us should stick together. I don't kill for money. I know. That's why I respect you. Bruce boarded the freighter as slave I lifted off, the hunter departing into Tatooine's night sky. The rebel ship's engines screamed to life, breaking atmosphere before Imperial forces could establish a blockade. Within minutes, they'd jumped to hyperspace, leaving the desert planet behind. Kira sat across from Bruce in the cargo hold, her expression mixing exhaustion and exhilaration. We did it. We actually did it. Jabba's operations on Tatooine are crippled. Hundreds of slaves freed. Imperial corruption exposed. And we lived. For now, Bruce said quietly, watching Tatooine shrink through the viewport. But the fight continues. Jabba will rebuild. The Empire will retaliate. And the Guild will keep hunting for profit. So what will you do? Bruce unsealed his cowl, meeting her eyes with Bruce Wayne's face but Batman's determination. I'll keep fighting. In this galaxy or another. Wherever people need someone to stand between them and darkness. The rebellion could use someone like you. We're always looking for operatives who can do the impossible. Then point me toward the next mission. I've got time to make up and a galaxy to learn about. Kira smiled, pulling up a holographic star map showing rebel operations across multiple sectors. There's a Moff on Ord Mantell running concentration camps for political prisoners. An Imperial research facility on Scarif developing weapons that could devastate populated worlds. And rumors of something called a Death Star that has rebel intelligence very concerned. Bruce studied the map, his tactical mind already analyzing threats and opportunities. This galaxy was vast, its problems overwhelming, its darkness deep. But he'd faced darkness before. And he'd learned long ago that one person, properly prepared and absolutely committed, could change the world. Or in this case, the galaxy. Show me everything, Bruce said. Let's get to work. Outside the viewport, stars streaked past in the impossible light of hyperspace, carrying the Bat toward new battles and unknown horizons. Behind on Tatooine, the legend was already growing, whispered in slave quarters and criminal dens, sung in cantinas and broadcast across underground networks. The story of a shadow that came from nowhere, fought for the helpless, and vanished into legend. The story of a being who proved that even in the darkest corners of the galaxy, where the Empire's tyranny and the underworld's cruelty seemed absolute, there were still those who would stand and fight. The story of the Bat. And in the Outer Rim's lawless frontier, where hope was a currency rarer than credits and more precious than spice, that story would inspire others to resist. To believe. To fight. Because that's what legends do, they show people what's possible when courage meets conviction, when skill meets sacrifice, when one being decides that injustice will not stand unchallenged. Batman had come to the Star Wars galaxy by accident. But he would leave his mark by choice, one liberated slave at a time, one dismantled operation at a time, one impossible mission at a time. The rebellion had gained a dark night. The Empire had gained a shadow it couldn't capture. And the galaxy far, far away would never be quite the same. The Outer Rim would remember the night Batman came to Tatooine. They would remember how Jabba the Hutt's empire burned, how slaves walked free, how the guild's finest hunters found themselves bested by a being who refused to kill but never stopped fighting. Years later, when rebel historians compiled accounts of pivotal moments in the war against the Empire, they would note a curious pattern: operations that succeeded against impossible odds, Imperial facilities infiltrated without casualties, slaves freed from supposedly impregnable holdings, all attributed to a shadowy operative who appeared in reports but never stayed for recognition. Bruce Wayne adapted to this new galaxy with the same determination that had driven him in Gotham. He learned its languages, studied its politics, mastered its technology. The rebellion gave him purpose and resources. He gave them capabilities they'd never imagined possible. Together, they fought battles that changed star systems and saved countless lives. But some nights, standing on the command deck of a rebel frigate watching unfamiliar constellations, Bruce would think of home. Of Alfred's dry wit, of the Batcave's familiar darkness, of Gotham's gargoyles and the mission that had defined his life. He didn't know if he'd ever return. The dimensional rift that had brought him here remained a mystery even to the rebellion's best scientists. Perhaps he would find a way home eventually. Perhaps this galaxy was his home now, with new battles to fight and new people to protect. Either way, Bruce Wayne would continue the work, because that's what Batman did. He fought for those who couldn't fight for themselves. He stood between the innocent and the dark. He never quit, never surrendered, never stopped believing that one person could make a difference. And in a galaxy ruled by the Empire's absolute power and the criminal underworld's ruthless cruelty, that belief was the most dangerous weapon of all. The legend of the Bat had only just begun. May the Force be with you. More stories await.